Alright folks, welcome back to the Modern Explorers Guild Workbench. I am Drew, and today we are going to work on this Ogroid Myrmidon, an HQ for a custom Slaves to Darkness army, the Cult of Malal. So we're going to take a look at the previous work that we did so we can kind of get an idea about where we're going with this. So this was the Demon Prince, and kind of the lore behind Malal is that any of the creatures that are exposed to Malal and worship him are slowly drained of their color. And so you can see here, this is a Demon Prince. It bears the mark of Tzeentch, and so the area around the mark of Tzeentch still has its color, you can see on this side. But the area over here, which doesn't have the mark near it, is losing its color. It's in a kind of dark shade. Then the sword from the Forge of Souls is also guaranteeing some color here. So we have some color back from the weapons as well. So marks and weapons are what bring the colors back. We're going to be looking to do a very similar thing with our Ogroid over here. So the side here that is in red is going to have the color, or going to have its normal colors, I should say. They're both going to have colors, but this other side here, away from that, will be much more in grayscale until we get to the blade. And then the blade is going to be casting some color onto the model as well. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. I think today we're going to start working on the colorless side. Then we'll move on to the colored side over here, and then we'll work on this blade. And just like the other models in this army, we're going to be doing non-metallics for everything. So there won't be any true metallics in this. To get things started off, I'm going to put some shades on my palette. Today, I'm going to be using some Scale 75 white and black. You easily could be using some Army Painter white and black. You could be using the Citadel line here. This is just the ones I'm picking up for today off of my bench. So all of these paints have already been shook, and I'm getting them onto my palette here. This one stopped up just a little bit, so I'm going to get right here. So I'm going to open this up. Hopefully we don't have a repeat of last stream where I had some midnight blue kind of explode onto the palette. So there is our black down. We have our white now. See if it stopped up too. It's not, so we're going to get some of our white on here. Like I just said, I have already shook all of these paints on the test tube shaker. Have our whites and our blacks, and then for our darkest blues here, we're going to use some Army Painter Ultramarine Blue. I'm going to go ahead and get that on my palette. This is going to be to strengthen those shadows that we see on this other side, and then we're going to keep moving up. I'm going to go ahead and grab a Monster Brush by Army Painter. I'm going to use this to move my paints from my pots. So I have here some Soltec Green, just moving on up. I'm going to get this onto my palette. And this is a wet palette, so these paints will stay good for us while we're working here for the next couple of hours. Just going to wash out this brush really quick. Then I'm going to grab some Lothrian Blue. This is again by Citadel. We're going to grab up some of this, get this on our palette. Now, when you're doing this, you might want to not throw all of your paints on the palette, even if you do have a wet palette. You might want to wait until you're closer to needing these paints. This is just to keep things moving later on, so it's not so disruptive to keep going back and getting paints. Here we have some Royal Cloak here. And at the very top, we're going to be using some Army Painter Gorgon Hide for our second to final highlight here. And then as we go, these paints are just going to get mixed together as I see fit to kind of get in our volumetric transitions on this guy. And so just like the Demon Prince, you're going to have volumetric highlights and we're going to have edge highlights. I'll talk a little bit more about those as we get to them. It looks like today I have not dropped any frames, which is pretty good. Last time I dropped all the frames, and so there was certainly some sadness there, but it looks like now I have gotten a little bit better handle on that. If anyone in the chat wants to chime in, if they see something go wrong, or if it looks right to you, feel free to do that. Let me know what's going on. I do keep a lookout on the chat as we're going here. So for here, we're going to start at... We've already established our midtones on this model here. And so you can see here, normally I like to start from black and work up, but I've just used rattle cans. These are Vallejo rattle cans here. The red here, and I don't remember what exact blue this is from Vallejo, but I believe it is their ultramarine equivalent. And these just came from the side. This was zenithalled up with Army Painter black, and then as a base, and then some Vallejo gray. I didn't go all the way to white though. That's going to be saved for when we put the highlights in ourselves. But let's start over here with some ultramarine blue from Army Painter. Here I'm using a Citadel medium layer brush, just a very kind of run-of-the-mill brush here. But we're going to deepen our shades here with this. And what ends up happening when you zenithal in some of this stuff here, it ends up looking a little bit grainy. And when we come back with our solid paint here, it really removes a lot of the graininess that you find, which is quite nice. So we're going to come in here, going to do the same. Deepen this. Not sure what that is. This little piece of the model here. Guess we'll just decide that it's part of his body. Just going to come from underneath here, do the same. I'm not obliterating all of this black and gray that's in here either. I do want to keep quite a bit of that. I'm going to go up a little further here, just slowly pull this up, so we'll have something to work with. Come to the underside of the tail here. This is a relatively thinned down ultramarine here. Yep, we're just removing that graininess that we get from our zenithal here. I'm going to come in around the hand, do the same thing, then let's work this up. So this zenithal really helps to establish where we're going to want to see this, since it came from the top, and that's where the light comes from on all of these particular models. This really helps me see kind of where I want this color to be the strongest, and where I kind of want to avoid. I am keeping my strokes pretty uniform and in the same direction. Especially for these base coats. I don't want to add a lot of texture here to the model. I want to keep kind of the texture that it has. Then I'm changing the direction here of my brush just to match this horn here. I'm going to come in here, catch under. I don't want to go over the cheek though with that. I'm just going to work that up here. Around the bottom and side of the chest. Going to darken here, the center of this belt. Going to do the same thing right here. just anywhere that I want to strengthen the shadows here and remove the graininess. Coming in here. We're just going to come through the center of each one of these belts. I want to leave as best I can the outer edges that have picked up a lot of the extra brightness. That way, when I come back through to do the highlights, I'll have a little bit more help there. Just so I can see where that's going. I'm just coming under the underside of these muscles. You always want to connect wherever these shadows are going. If you remember the old like Cadian forces from GW, they were always, the ones I'm thinking of are from the 90s. They had these weird like islands of muscle on them, which was really strange. And so they would just have like kind of flesh color, but then surrounded by a dark line. Which is not how muscles work. Although it was fun, we want to avoid doing that here with these models. We want a little bit more natural, a little bit more realistic transition. And you can see right here what I'm talking about. If I just made kind of these dark circles here and here, it would leave these as kind of weird muscle islands. And that's not what we want. We would like this all to be connected like it is in real life whenever you're looking at something of this nature. Alright, so we're going to come under here into this shadow. We're going to pull that there. Again, this is a fairly thin paint. I'm not globbing this on in any way here. I'm going to come into that recess. Same thing there. And here. All right. I'm going to come into the middle of this belt. And we're just going to add this color in here as well. Now I'm looking at this, and it could be that this is not quite dark enough for me. I'll make that decision in a moment, though. Just strengthen this where I think it needs to be strengthened. Coming along the bottom here, removing that graininess, coming into my shadows, hitting the camera as is tradition. I'm going to come in here. Putting in my shadow here, avoiding hitting the tops of the cheek. I want to keep that if I can. I actually like the way that looks there. I'm going to strengthen under this horn here too. Just clean that up. I'm not going to come to the other side here because then I'll start getting into my other color and then I'll get a lot more purple. I don't want too much purple on this side because there's definitely a dividing line on this model. So one of the things I noticed when I was looking at the prints, I was trying to decide exactly what to do with this. This model right here, this print actually is kind of facing you dead on, and these marks are actually not really attached on this guy, so this way he would have a little bit more utility. But this guy kind of has, he's looking at you flat, and so his body is more of a plane facing you. And so you can actually see both sides of him at the same time, which is kind of cool. It makes a really neat effect. The blue side on the left, and then the non-metallics on the right. Well, this guy actually has a little bit more of two sides of him, and you're looking almost on his edge. So you can see here the ridge on him too. So you can't see as much of the blue or the red at any given time, which makes it a little more interesting, at least to me, where you can see both of them here. You can do some fun things. By turning him one way, you only see the blue. By turning him this way, you only see the red almost. So that did kind of inform how much I wanted to darken this other side down. But looking at this here, I do feel like that needs to go darker. And so you guys are here for the whole process. And so I thought, you know, maybe this ultramarines blue is going to be dark enough, but it's not quite for me. So let's go ahead and grab a little bit darker blue. Taking a look over here at what I have to work with. Let's see. I am actually quite a fan of that midnight blue. Actually, it's not midnight. It's dark sky blue. So this is the one that had the MoMA, but this is a little bit darker. Let's go ahead and put this in. So we're just going to go over what we just did with this. And let's see. Did I? Okay, good. I unclogged this. Alright, this will also help us to transition to the other side, which you can see here doesn't have nearly as much color to it here, the back side of the model. So let's go ahead and grab up some of this. Yeah, this is going to do us a bit better, I feel. I'm going to mix it with quite a bit of water. I want it to flow very well. I don't want to really see the edge of this paint on the model, so I can blend it in fairly easy. So I just washed out my brush here. Now I'm going to pick up some of that thin down blue, dark blue paint that I just got. And now we're going to go back in here and we're going to, yeah, there we go. We're going to make these shadows even darker. Come right down into that recess. Yeah, and that's going to do us just a little better. I'm just trying to get to the edge here without touching. Same for here. We're going to come under here, get this all connected. In fact, we can kind of use what we've already done here. That way we aren't totally wasting it. So we've come in here with this darker color, and we're just going around but not totally covering up that ultramarines in here. And then this is still fairly harsh, you can see, but we'll blend this in a little while. This is just getting our shadows nice and established here. I want to avoid the tops here. All right. Changing the direction of my stroke to go with the muscle fibers. Things like muscle, it's also really important that you're going with the direction that the muscle fiber grows in. It's subtle, but your eye will catch the difference, and so will the eye of people looking at your model. So making sure you follow the grain of the muscle is really important. And also, as we come down in here, I'm just following this belt as well. I come into the darkest parts of this, get those shadows established. Wash out my brush here. And it looks like I have dropped 0 frames still, so very, very good. All right, good to see. I'm going to come in here. Then we're going to go all the way down in there and pull this out. And of course we're going to blend all this stuff together. There are some harsh transitions in here, or harsher, nothing's super crazy. But there's definitely some harsher transitions in here than we're going to want in the end. Coming under some of these things, establishing some of those shadows. And this is an HQ here, so this is going to be a little bit more work again on this than I would do just my general troop. In fact, I can show you an example of one of my troops that I'm working on. So this is one of the guys, and he's just a Chaos Warrior with the Mark of Tzeentch. And a lot of this is just dry brushed. He has the same effect here where the weapon is what's generating the color on the model. But this one's for a different video here. I just wanted to show you some of the continuity I'm going for in this army. And the Chaos Undivided, I know I'm kind of jumping around here. The Chaos Undivided guys, the ones that don't bear a mark, they were done just in grayscale. And so they were slowly painted, all their highlights were put in using just grayscale. Those 3D prints are from Thingaverse. I don't think they're available anymore. They were taken down, but they were part of the Sons of Malice, is what it was called. Those are 3D prints from Thingaverse. They were free. Since they were taken down, though, I can't give the guy credit, unfortunately. But they are quite good, so if you can find them, I would recommend it. It was for his custom army, or so it said. Alright, so I'm going to continue to come in here, now that I've had that quick aside, giving this enough time for some of this to dry. Come in here, darken up some of these lines here. Come under here, the tail, using mostly the edge of the brush here. Again, following those muscles, making sure that my strokes don't go against them. I'm going to come in here, making sure not to touch the tops of any of this. Going to have it dark here in the middle, and then we're going to just blend that into the back. Then I'm changing the direction of my stroke here to follow the contours of the horn. I want to make sure there's still those little bits of lighter color on the bottom of the horn. I'm going to grab some more of this, come in here. And this is my darkest color for this side. So when I'm done with this color, this will be as dark as over here gets, so I do want to make sure I've established this everywhere it makes sense. It's going to be difficult to really come back to this. Getting in there with this foot, it's kind of hard for me to get you guys in there too right now. But we'll have to blend this all together here. And we can see down here, it's going to be much darker on this side, and that's totally fine, but I am going to carry this blue over. It is blue on black, so it's dark, but you will be able to tell this in the end. So this helps define some of these muscles over here. And I'm just going to put him back down so I can see where it becomes darkest. See, I'm just following the contours of the model here, letting the model do the work. Come into the center of this belt, darken that down. Hit the camera just a little bit, just for good measure. Come in here, do the same. Come up to the bottom here. Establish the shadows under here too. Come into these darkest areas here. Just going to keep establishing our shadows. Now, this is an iterative process, so what's going to happen with this is we do have our shadows in, they'll have to be blended, and then we're going to end up having to come back here at some point, blend things, move things around, just to get everything to meld and mesh right. So for this, we definitely will end up back here at some point. All right. There we are with this, and now we're going to come back to our ultramarine. Make sure we have plenty of water in here. We want this to be a pretty thin down paint. Not so thin as to be a wash, but we are going to be blending this here. I'm going to take just a touch of my dark sky and put in, so just the tip of the brush, and put it into my ultramarine here. This is going to help blend these. And so now I'm going to come along this edge, and now I'm going to blend this transition here so it's not so harsh in all these places. Going all the way in, making nice clean strokes down. Same thing here, we're just gonna blend these lines. Sometimes with a stipple motion, sometimes with smoother strokes. It just depends on what I need to do to get that to be as smooth as I can. This is not any kind of Golden Demon entry or anything, so we're not going to spend forever on this stuff, but I would like it to be as nice as I can get it in the moment here. And we're just finding those harsher transitions and helping to blend some of that together. Hitting the camera again for good measure. Following that line there, coming up here. Picking up a little more water. Even though I am on a wet palette, it's very easy to have your paint be not quite thinned enough, not have enough water in it. Now, I am going over this in a little bit of a strange way. Some of you watching are probably wondering why I'm going over basically black without establishing a midtone first. Well, again, this is going to be that moment where the model has lost some of the color. And so normally I would do a little bit better job of establishing some kind of midtone to work off of. But in this case, because of exactly how these models, the lore works on them, I am going to make it to where this is a little bit less colorful. And putting that over black, not establishing a midtone, is a way to do that. You could also then argue that it's less visually interesting, and that's valid. This is just the way I'm choosing to do these particular models. Alright, so I think we've blended most of the harshness there. We might end up coming back to this side again to work it. But we're going to go ahead and move on to our next color, which is going to be our Soltec green. So I'm going to grab up some of this Soltec green here. I'm going to mix a good amount of water into it. That's 2 brushfuls so far, pulling it down in. I'm going to grab some of our ultramarine, about 1 full brushful, just to get this blended together. And now I'm going to wash my brush out, pick up some of that, and we're going to continue up and around the model. So pick up some in my brush, and we're going to come through here, working that up the model nice and thin. Back over some of where we've been. Bring that up far enough to where we have something to work with whenever we're going to blend our next colors in. Bring this down. Now this is light enough for me to come into these lighter folds here and work them. Come back, get a little more paint. Continue on and up. Alright, so now, yep, this is bright enough here to where this is what we're going to use to really establish what the top of this looks like. Nice thin layer here. Keeping it to now the upper layers, we're just going to keep pushing this a little bit more water so that we flow nicely. Alright, keeping this below that belt there. Going to move the model, so now I'm coming back to this other side. There's a very thin paint over black, so there's just going to really be the hint of this back here. Then we're keeping the direction of this muscle here. So you can see we're basically doing a grayscale of this model, but using these blues. And so that's why we're able to get away kind of with doing what we're doing. This is just going to be a much darker piece on this side. Here I'm just going in between these ridges. Here we're coming to the top using the same color. there's a little tooth right there that we're going to work with in a moment. All right. And then we're going to lose this color as we go to the very top. But we're going to blend it over in here. So it's going to be actual grayscale right on top there. But we want to blend it over. Pick up any of this that got a little out of hand. All right, same thing here. We're going to pull this up. Now we're working with a very thinned down paint. Changing the direction of my stroke to match what it is I'm painting. Pulling this along this edge. Are going to hit these upper areas here. We can always come back and add this highlight in. Blend these edges. This is already dried down in here. I can see a little bit of a harsh transition here. Use a little bit of a stippling motion on that. Then come towards the base of each one of these bits of belt. And just kind of pull this color upwards. I'm just going to make this a little stronger going into the black and white. Alright, now let's take a look at where we're at now. I'm slowly working you guys out of the frame. I apologize for that. Alright, so here's what we have so far. And now we're going to continue to move up here. Right after we get, there we go, this line in. Alright, so now we're going to go ahead and grab our Lothrian blue with Citadel paint. And we're going to do much the same thing we did before. We're going to go ahead and thin it down. Take a touch of our Soltec green, so just the tip of a brush, add that in. Now that we've got that mix nice and thin here on the palette, I'm going to come in and grab some of this up, and we're just going to continue to work. So on some of these spots that are getting the most light here, then we're going to use this to come into these areas on the belts. Again, these areas that are going to be picking up quite a bit of light. Now we're kind of working on the first bit of what will become our highlights. Getting this to collect on the areas that we would have light falling. Start to catch the edges here that are torn. And then the bottom area of holes is where you would see light start to build up on things. Catch there. Then the tops of these bits. Strengthen that here as it's towards the top here. Now we're going to leave the bottom edges of these things alone. We're going to blend that in a little softer. You can see that's a pretty harsh transition there. And we're going to use the magical technique of stippling just to get this in here a little bit smoother. Same thing here. Just slowly adding these in. We're going to come through here. Going to get these higher areas now. Just a hint that that's in there. You can see these guys are pretty beefy. You can see that transition there. It's a little harsh. So we're going to stipple the edge here. And we're going to come in here. Start to brighten up these areas, but not too much because this is on the foot. Bring this here. And so some edges we do want a little bit of a harsher transition. And this is going to be one of them, this area that has the belts, because that is a sharper edge. Whereas muscles tend to not be as sharp of an edge. The belts do tend to have a little sharper. Now we're going to follow this muscle here, following the grain of the muscle. You can see I changed my stroke here to follow the direction that muscle would go. Move on to there. This muscle would come from this direction here. And we're going to blend this in. Now, you can see just as I see harsh transitions, places that don't have sharp edges, I just come back and I stipple the edge here. And that tends to get the effect that I want. Now for this, we're going to highlight the cheek here and the jowl. Just slowly stippling in that effect. You can see we're already getting a much brighter effect on this side than on this side. And I see here there's kind of an area at the very bottom here I didn't do very well, so I'm going to grab a little bit of my night sky or night blue. What was this? Dark sky. I can never remember the name of this. I'm going to hold this in a little bit more interesting way. And I'm going to come in. I'm just going to get this deep down in there. Alright. And I'm going to pull it over here too. And this is just as you go, you fix the things that you see. Same thing right in there. And I got that someplace I didn't want, so I'm just going to remove that with my finger there. Alright, excellent. So now on we continue to go. I'm going to grab some royal cloak, and you can see back here is we're not really doing a whole lot with that right now. We'll come back to that later. We'll focus on this side here. So we're going to grab our royal cloak. We're going to do the same process. About 2 brushes full of water here. I'm going to grab a tip of a brush of our previous color, mix it in. It's going to need just a little bit more water. So nice and thin so it flows well. Because again, we already have our midtones on here. We've got our shadows already in. we're just trying to blend these to higher and higher colors here to just give the idea that things are further up on the model. And so this is just going to be the same deal coming in here. Just going to fuzz this edge here. And same thing, brighten this area down here. And this top part of this, we're going to do the same. Brighten up this. Catch this line. The top of this piece, so some of the bits here that are on his little loincloth here. And here we really are going to make good use of stippling just to get this color where I want it, but nice and blended in. Same deal here. This is some of the highest stuff that's going to be right here in the middle. Do the same for this belt. It's going to be a pretty sharp belt area right here. Come in here. Add this color to some of the higher portions. And I can see here where this is just a little bit of a harsh transition. We'll come back and work on that. And in here. I'm going to grab a little more of this color with a little bit less water. And this is going to let me come in here and add this as a highlight to the edge of the belt here. We're just trying to establish this shape really well right there. And this brush has definitely seen better days. It has life in it still. But here, I'm going to turn this so that I can really well get this edge highlight on here. Then we're just going to come into these areas and brighten them up with a bit of stippling. These are some of the highest areas up on this model, so this makes sense. We're going to blend them through there with the stippling motion. Part of the hand we're going to draw some attention to. And then just a touch through here. Bringing this up onto the side of the neck with a little bit more of a stippling motion. Getting stabbed by his spear. Bring this color as a highlight to the side of the corn, and we're going to do the same in here at the top of the jowl and at the top of the cheek. Get a little more paint here. Come in and then nice and clean. Get that in there. All right, so I'm going to go backwards just a little bit. I see here that this area And the very center of his chest needs a little bit better transition here. Just a little harsh. So we're going to come back, put that in, and this area right here, I had a small errant stroke. So I'm actually going to grab some of my ultramarines. And I'm going to come in here and I'm going to fix that. I'm going to clean up the edge of this highlight here. I don't want to take it too small because I do want to have a final place to work. Alright, excellent. Now, I'm going to take a little bit of my wraith bone here and I'm going to work it in to this final color here, which was Gorgon Hide by Army Painter. Now what this is going to do is add just a little bit more warmth to the top of it, the space where it's this blue color. So we're going to grab some of our Gorgon Hide and we're going to touch it in here. So this is about a 50-50 mix, I would say, of Gorgon Hide to Wraith Bone. Got that all mixed up. Go ahead and thin this all out. Gonna grab just a little bit of my, let's see, Lortharian Blue. Felt like it was still just a little too bright there, just so I can add a touch of my previous color back in. Alright, on this I'm actually going to switch over from my Citadel Medium layer brush to my Army Painter Kalinsky Master class. I'm going to make sure that looks good. It does. Switching my jars here. I do recommend you have a couple of jars of water handy so that when one gets a little too inundated, you can switch over. Alright, so I'm going to grab this up, add a little more water so this paint is nice and thin so that it flows. Clean this brush out. I'm going to pick some of this up. We're going to come in. And we're just going to stipple some of this in here. I know this looks harsh right now, but we are going to come back with some of our previous colors over this. I apologize if you can hear whatever's going on outside. There's definitely some animal stuff going on out there with the squirrels and possibly a red-tailed hawk. We're going to use this as our highlight. For the belt here and for this area here. Come in and we're gonna basically edge highlight these things in here, give them good definition. just going to bring this all the way to this top area here. Brush is getting a little dry, so we're going to go ahead and wash it out. Grab up some more of our paint, add just a touch more water here, and we're going to come in, oh, and that's too much, so I'm going to get rid of some of that. And now we're going to come in, and now, there we go. Yep. Never be afraid to just reset that real quick. You can usually do that with your finger. Usually. Especially if you catch it right away. Alright. And then this is just a little too harsh over here, so I'm going to grab up some of our previous color. And so painting here it's never really a linear process. This is always just going back and forth, seeing what you like, seeing what you don't like, realizing that maybe something's not exactly as you wanted it, so it needs some attention to bring it back in line. So this is just me taking some of that Lothrian blue. Actually, no, this is Royal Cloak. And I'm just heading back over this, just because it was a little too harsh there. And we'll probably do that with the rest of this as well, but right now, we're going to continue going with our edge highlights on this. And so we're going to grab up this edge right here. This is some very, very thin paint. It doesn't need much. Catch that, and now that we're here, we're actually going to come in and catch some of these little nicks that are in here. And we're going to highlight some of the damage on this leather so that it looks a little more convincing. Get a little more water. Very thin now, so we're going to come in and catch the very tops of these. Just move that there. Catching some of those leather bits, and we're going to do the same thing here. So this side also has some of those little nicks and tears for the leather. We're going to put those in and highlight them up. Same thing down here. I'm going to do that same thing. Have a couple little rings here that would be particularly bright, so we'll use a little bit less thin paint for those. Right, catch that. Now that's leather still, so the metal bits in here will actually get the brightest highlight in the end. The leather will stop at a certain point because we still want the metal bits to read as metal bits. And if we make the leather and the metal the same brightness, that's not going to read exactly right. So I'm coming in here now, just hitting these little bits. And just edge highlighting this cloth in the places that would gain the most. have to clean that up just a tad. Oh, going to come through here. And we're going to catch the edges of the bottom of the holes, because that's where you would see the greatest amount of light catch. Catch those bits. And those tears. And to fix that area, we just come back with a little bit of our thin down paint from 2 steps ago. Excellent. Now that transition is not so harsh. I'm going to come back here with that from 2 steps ago. We're going to make sure this can be seen. See, we're just getting brighter and brighter as we go. Right. Washing out my brush, grabbing some more from over here. A little more intense, coming back in. Making some of these little nicks very sharp, which is how that leather is done. So we're coming in with the edge of this brush and just giving some of those a little sharp edge highlight here. It's a little too harsh. There we go. Pulling that back down. Stippling the edges there. All right. So this is doing pretty well here. Our lightest spots here have that, and we're going to transition over to a much more grayscale on this other side. So for the top area. And so that's getting pretty good on this side. Right now, I'm going to go ahead and put a single coat of white on my blade, because this blade is going to need to be totally white whenever we're doing our molten blades. So all the guys in this army have molten blades. And it's going to take a few coats of white to really get this up to where I want it. So I'm going to grab this white, my scale 75. Now I could use any white again. Whites and blacks are not all created equal, but for this purpose, for an undercoat, you're not going to really see much of a difference here. In fact, I might actually transition over after this first coat. So just making sure this is nice and smooth. Once I get this on here, I'm going to make a nice smooth stroke all the way, not stopping till I get off the end of the blade. Same thing here. And then after this, we're going to move on to that other side, the side that's red, and we're going to do some skin. And a much more normal skin tone. Alright, coming in here to my clean water. Getting a little bit more of that. And coming in here. Excellent. Alright, and the other side, of course. It's a little bit more tricky to get to, but we're going to hold it in a fun way here. And for this initial coat here, I'm not worried about getting full coverage here. I'm just trying to get this first layer on, and it'll make a big difference in the next layers to have this the first one in. Alright, again I want those strokes to go all the way to the end here. Just make sure that does that here, because if I don't, you'll see those strokes in the final product, which I don't want. Just catching the edge here, especially on the side that's facing up. But we'll also catch it on the side that's facing down for completeness. These are the kind of things you'll notice in your last steps if you haven't done them well. And at that point, it's kind of late to fix it. You're going to have to come back and basically redo everything you've already done, which will be no fun. Alright, got a little bit of water here. So now we're going to come in, and this red portion here has been nicely based so that we can actually do a little bit of skin. So we're going to come in here with some scale 75 basic flesh. And this is where the softer under parts of him are going to be colored. So there's not too many underparts of him that are exposed there, and this is clogged, but we learned from yesterday, we don't go crazy on here. Oh, and actually, you know what? I haven't used this before. Scale 75 paints are actually sealed. So I'm going to reach into here and grab a little drill. You could use any sharp object here, but drill like this is really safe. So this hasn't been opened at all, and this is one of the ways they keep their paints very fresh. I'm going to clean off the tip of my drill. These are some of the paints that I got for Christmas. So this is just one I've not used yet. So now that this is open, I'm going to put a touch onto my palette here. Alright, and I do like references for these kind of things, partially just to see what's going on. So let's take a look at the Warhammer community version of this, and then I can kind of get an idea about where they went with it. So yeah, here is the launch of this model from Warhammer Community, and we can see that he is this kind of lighter color on the inside of his chest area, and then it gets darker as it goes to kind of the back, which is going to be counter to how I want my shadows done too, but this is okay. So now that we've seen this reference here, this just gives me some place to start. We're going to keep going here on this side. So this is going to be a little bit more of a base coat, so we're going to thin this less. I still want it to flow, so we're going to have some water for sure. But unlike these other bits where we're really blending in towards the end, this is going to be much more of a kind of base coat for this guy. And so in here, we're going to come in, and especially in these under areas, we're going to go ahead and get this on and in. All right, then along here. See that kind of transition down. Right, and then we're going to have this on his face too. Now this is fairly thin paint, so we're going to come back. It's already dry. So now we're going to work this in. And there's going to be a bit of work here to transition this, but that's what we're going to be doing. And because of the way the light's falling on the leg, I really don't think we're going to see too much of the softer parts of that. So now that we've done that, we're going to actually come in with our trusty Citadel Rhinox hide. This Rhinox hide is a brown that has red and orange in it, mostly red though. And it is one of my favorite bases for anything that's going to end up being skin colored. It's a base that I've used quite a bit for non-metallics with gold, with brass, with bronze. It just is a really great base. It has really good coverage. It's very opaque. It works really well, kind of in general, for all of those different tasks. And in this case, we're going to come in, and this is going to be our base here that we're going to work with for the top areas on this guy. Because this is going to be that kind of darker skin area. But remember, this side is the side that has some color to it. Push that all the way to the edge there. Pull this in. Pull you over here just a little bit. This is going to be the side that has the mark. So the color, the original color of this guy will be on. Of course, we're going to layer up quite a bit of colors on him as well. So this is kind of our base for that. Coming in here with a mix of browns here. So what we're going to do eventually, I do want the red still to kind of come from underneath, so I'm going to make sure I don't totally obliterate that. And then this little edge here, we're actually going to stipple it in, but I'm going to make this fairly strong here where it is. Bonking the camera, and it will transition up here because this is where he's going to have his mark. So as it gets to the back here, it will eventually just go away into this kind of monochrome color that we have back here, or just black and white, I should say. We'll keep it going just a little on the other side of this because we just want to give the hint of it. Alright. These belts over here are actually going to be pretty dark. So I'm going to grab up a little bit of our scale 75 black. And so they're going to be a very dark color in reality. They don't look it so far because they've been on this other thing, the other side that's got blues. But we're going to come over and we're going to hit the belt with some black here, leaving the very top of that exposed. Same thing for this belt that's inside of his arm here. We're going to come in here with our scale 75 black. And we're just going to hit that so it reads the right color. This handle also is wrapped in leather, so we're going to go ahead and hit that as well. I'm going to reach deep down in there with our black. Grab up this belt. Yep, same thing here. We're going to keep going up in here. Get you guys back into the frame. And just coming all the way up here with it. So then this will read proper in a moment. Strengthen this color down here and up here. And these are very thin coats of paint, so they dry almost immediately. And I'm going to come back in here with my scale 75 basic flesh. But this time, I'm going to mix a touch of Rhinox hide into it. And this is what we're going to use to blend the transition between the two. So now we're going to come back here. And we're going to blend this together here. This is one of those slow and steady processes that you'll use to get these all together here. Because it's a kind of organic thing, it's going to take it a moment to come together, but you do want these to be pretty well blended. We have a hair that came off of our brush, so I'm just going to grab that. There it goes. There might actually be an eyelash or something. It's something we don't want in the paint. And we're just slowly blending these guys together. Grab this up, get this blend going up here. And come back for our darker areas. Just going back and forth between some Rhinox hide and our basic flesh. So we have that cavity that's in the cheek here where his mouth is open, be a little bit darker, but we have the edge of the jaw have a highlight here. That way it reads a little better. You can see we're starting to get those bits blended together. We're gonna keep on moving up, and we're gonna keep going back and forth as that needs to dry completely, so we can check it out in a second. But I'm gonna come in here with some Mournfang Brown, which is gonna be us moving up a bit further for him. So this is gonna be getting closer to the tops here, and then eventually what'll happen is we'll move over to that same or similar mixture of Wraithbone and then probably this brown here as we get to the very top of this model here on this side. And so this is an HQ for the army. Normally we wouldn't be spending quite so much time, but because this is an HQ, it is one of the ones that we are gonna have as a more centerpiece to the army. So we'll definitely take our time here, making it look nice. Going for the tops of this. You can see here with this color now, it is starting to come together. I'm going to hit the camera a few more times for good measure. There we go. And have it come just over this. And then stipple into that fade. Same thing here. Then fade it in. We're going to have this color on his face as well. Bring you back into the middle. This is a fairly thin coat, so we're going to come back here, strengthen this up. Has totally dried on most of the model. Helping to blend all of that together there. Gonna grab up some of that flesh. We're gonna actually mix this now into our Mournfang. We're gonna come back, a little bit of water, and we're gonna strengthen those areas that are supposed to be that lighter flesh. Just come into these little under bits. Do want to make sure that that is connected. Otherwise, like I was talking before, you kind of get these weird muscle islands, which are a little strange. We don't want. Gonna come back for our Mournfang now that we've taken that moment. And as you can see, this is just a real alliterative process where we're just continuously adding more and more layers of paint here to get the effect that we want. So I want him to kind of be this brown color here a little bit more strongly. So I'm going to add another layer here, just Just a little there, sticking into what it was we've already done. And then that transitions over there. We're going to come back on his hand, do the same. Then, yep, right there, I wanted that to still be a little blue right on that side. I'm going to come in, strengthen this color on the face. And we will go back in, strengthen the shadows. So you can see we're moving from this bluish color over here. It's actually very Zinchi, which is nice since this guy will bear the mark of Zinch. But he also is from the Cult of Malal, so he has a lot to work with over here. Alright, I'm going to grab a little bit more of this. Come back in with this Mournfang as well, but with some of our flesh tone mixed in. And we're going to strengthen it again. Because instead of adding very strong highlights to this side, I'd like it to be more of this color that you see right here, this kind of brown color that has some yellow mixed into it. And if by painting this over and over I don't get the effect I want, I will come in with some yellow in it. And that will allow me to keep this brownish color without it looking like the flesh tone underneath, but still get it to be brighter, which is definitely something I'm interested in. But we'll see. It might cooperate, and it might get to where I want it to be all on its own, or it might need help. We'll see. But in the meantime, I see some more leather bits that need help. You can see right now they're red, but in a moment they're going to be a darker color. They're going to be black. Oops, bonk the camera a little bit to bring that in there. So I'm just trying to hit the center of these leather bits. And we'll bring that right to there. Nice. All right, we are starting to get that nice color that I was looking for on top. We're just going to continue to build that up so that it's nice and strong. In the meanwhile, though, we can take some more of our flesh tone, mix that into our Mournfang. And we can come back, strengthen some of these areas underneath. And we're going to come back on top with our pure Mournfang. And we're just going to build that up a little more. So it's a nice pure color, even down in those recesses. Let's see, I think I glued these on pretty well. Yep, I did. Slight mistake there. Would have made my life easier if I had not done that. But for the shield, for these other guys, I had actually painted their shields white and black. And they're very similar shield. This is the 4-point versus the 8-point here. But I'm going to do something similar on this one. Then I think what we'll do is Mark of Tzeentch somewhere on this side, possibly here. We'll freehand that in. And then on this side, I think we're going to have the Mark of Malal, which is that white and black skull. Alright, so we're going to come in here with a little bit of our Wraithbone up to our Mournfang. And we're going to make this a little bit thinner here. And we're going to come in and we're going to have a continuation of what we were doing right over here. So now what's going to happen, as you can see, this is the brightest part of the leg here. It goes right to that blue. This just allows me to build up that color slowly with a lot of little dots. And this is just going to help me to get it exactly where I want it. Get you back down here. Now we have that. Just brightening this area up. And we're going to come back with our Mournfang Pure. A little bit of water in there, wipe out our excess. And we're going to go over that. Same thing here. So basically we add just that little bit of undercoat. And then we come back with our Mournfang. So that it's not super duper bright. All right, starting to look pretty good there too. The other choice for this is that the shield we do in non-metallics. Now that would more match this demon. We'll bring him back here. Just gonna take this Mark of Tzeentch off of him for now so I don't drop it off into the water bottle or something cool. And so maybe that's what we do. Maybe instead of painting it white and black, we go with a little bit more visual interest here and do a non-metallic on those metallics over there. This would also mean that anywhere else we have metallics over here, we would do that as well, which I think is actually a pretty good idea. So let us do that. Which means here, I'm going to want to base coat this shield, but I want to look at it really well right here. And so I can see here, this is going to be my brightest portion from where the other lights went. And this is going to be a darker portion here for my non-metallics. Well, we're going to stick to the same color palette we did with this other guy, and we're going to go ahead and do our base coat. And so for this particular base coat, we're going to go ahead and grab our Sahara Yellow by AK Interactive. So I'm going to put this on our palette, and this is going to be our base for the rest of this side's metallics. Then we're also going to hit up the area around the blade of the spear because it will have some color too, and it's going to be this. So let's go ahead, grab up this. We want it to have a little bit of water so it flows, but not too much because we're going to have this as a base. So I'm going to go ahead and put this on all the places that it's going to need to go. And this is not any kind of special technique or anything. We're just putting on this base coat for all of our metallics over here. And that is fur. Then this area here, we might leave the back of this shield alone. We'll do this for this one. So this is going to also be in that gold metallic, the brass color. And part of this one, I had you out of frame. Let's get you back there. And then part of this one, so I'm just putting these base coats on here, and then this will fade in here. So I'm going to get that on, and I'm only going to partially cover that one. Looking to see if I see any more metals here, other than, of course, the shield. Do this as well. This little plate should help add some visual interest here. So now we're going to come in and we're going to put this on basically the whole shield. Being very careful not to get this on the skin that we just spent so much time on. Also don't want to get this on the skulls, because I actually kind of like the idea of leaving them alone. It is slightly strange that they have that look, but you know, magic. Because they're going to keep that red-blue, while the rest of this ends up having this non-metallic around it. But I'm okay with this. I think that's actually kind of an interesting effect there. I'm going to bring this down here. And this just has a bit of water mixed into it so it flows. Not crazy thick, not crazy thin. So we're also going to leave that side of the spike alone too. Just have the shield itself. There's some cuts in the shield that I'm changing the angle of my brush to like try and hit a little better. Alright, we're going to leave the bottom of that shield there. We're actually going to use that. We're going to blend it with our darker colors in a moment. Now, this needs to dry. There's not any more on the other side there. Now we're going to move over to our blade here and get our first coat of non-metallics on that. That's a much smaller area. And so I'm going to go ahead and switch my brushes back out. Going to get a drink of water. I go ahead and move back to my Army Painter Kolinsky Masterclass brush. Yeah. For this to work, I am going to need a little bit more water in this. So grab this up, and now we're going to come in, and we're going to get this center portion here. And this is really just base coating this out. There's a skull right there. And now we're gonna make this area be the brass color, but we are gonna come back on this top portion here. This ball here is actually going to be made of steel. So we're gonna skip painting it with this base coat. It's gonna receive a gray base coat. And this is just coming along, giving us this mid-tone to work from. And we should be able to come back in here no problem with our white. Brush is drying out a little bit. So this is one of the issues with using a brush that has a very small belly like this. It will dry out very, very quickly, even when you have a fairly wet paint. This kind of brush works really well with inks. This will allow you to write some of that stuff. So if anyone's ever wondered how I wrote all that stuff on those tanks that are at the store, I used some Liquitex acrylic inks. And this is very, very little. So I'm just going to come in here. It's already dried, which is what's allowing me to do this. Now we have that base coat on. I'm less worried about the other side of that. Now I'm going to mix up a gray here. So we're going to take equal parts black and white. And I'm going to mix them until I feel that I have a nice, just slightly darker than middle tone gray. Alright, there we go. Just slightly darker than a middle tone. And we're going to come in, and this is going to receive that nice gray start here. I'm going to leave the black underneath. And this is just going to be from the weapon. As far as the shaft goes, we'll have it work its way about halfway down the area just before his hand, and then we're gonna let it go back. And so that's all the color he's gonna get. Because it's not the whole weapon, it's the blade. And looking at these blades, they're very dry now, which is great. So we're going to take a touch of water, bring that into our white. This is our scale 75 white here. I'm going to brace my finger against his horn, and I'm going to pull down. Make some nice, even lines down the blade. Same thing here, this is just base coating so that we can do our lava blades. Okay, so there's our second coat on there. I'm going to brace him against my hand here. I'm going to get him down. And we're going to do nice smooth lines all the way down. Same thing back here. This is so we can wet blend our reds and our yellows onto this in a moment. Right. Let's come back over here, take a look at this guy. So this is all dry over here now. So I'm going to come back here to my Mornfang, and we're going to add a bit more. basically using that paint that we put down to have it shine through a little bit and have that be what's creating the lighter skin tone. Because skin looks the way it does because you're looking through quite a bit of stuff. You're looking through the skin, through the layers of skin, through the capillaries. It bounces, the light bounces off the flesh with all of the color of the blood added to it. It goes back through the skin, and then you're looking at it. So it has a depth to it because you're looking at all the blood in the skin. It's what makes it immediately apparent if something's dead or alive. Because you can tell very quickly, your eye does, whether or not you're looking at something that has blood running through it. Alright, so now that we have that base coat over here a little bit better, it looks a little brighter there where I want it, I'm going to grab some more of our AK Interactive Sahara Yellow, and we're going to continue to make this base coat here stronger. So I'm just going to pull this down. And again, it might not seem all that important to have these strong base coats. Like, why are you putting 3 layers of paint on here? Well, you can't tell now, but when we get to the final work on it, you will be able to tell that I was lazy, didn't put it on. I can always tell when someone shows me a model and they've put like a single coat on their base coat and then just kept going, because you can always see the prime showing through. And, you know, if that's what you're going for, that's fine. But if you're looking for a model that looks more complete, that looks like it's had a little bit more time spent on it, then you're going to need to go ahead and strengthen up those base coats so that you don't have any of the prime showing through. I think ultimately that's going to give you just a better overall effect for whatever it is you're doing. Although there are some techniques that you can do that will use that, seeing the prime below as part of the technique. Alright. And again, I'm trying to avoid the spikes because I do want that color to remain. Alright. Just blending that in there. And I'm using that little bit at the bottom, so it's going to make our darker colors on the non-metallics even darker. Because instead of being on that yellow, it's actually going to be on that kind of red-black. So, slowly worked you off of the center. Let's go ahead and get you back in there. Strengthen up this. Same for the other. Strengthen up the front side of this. Alright, same right here. Strengthen this paint. Very careful not to paint something I don't want. Then we'll paint this little piece here. Okay, you can see a little portion right here that I want to hit with our Warnfang. Alright, same thing there. Looking pretty good. Alright, just taking a look at some of the transitions here on this. And I have to decide how far I want to go back on this other side of the shield. I actually kind of like that when you turn it like this, you don't see any of that color except for the blade. And then when you turn it on this side, you can see all of that, which is really nice. Alright, we're just letting that dry a little bit more. Just take a look at that white. I think it's getting pretty dry too. Excellent. This coat over here needs another go. So this was our 50-50, or just over 50-50, I should say, for our base tone gray here. So I'm going to come in, do the same thing again. Alright, that looks pretty good for that. And I'm going to put this brush away, back onto the rack. It's our Citadel medium layer. I'm going to pick back up our Army Painter Kalensky Masterclass, and I'm going to come back in with some more of our AK Interactive Sahara Yellow as our base coat, and I'm going to get this on in here. Getting this ready, of course, to do our non-metallics in a moment. With our nice, strong base tone in here. I'm going to hit the camera a little bit. You guys love that by now. Alright. That looks good there. We'll let that transition to that darker color on the bottom. Alrighty, let's take a look at our time. Looking at about 10 minutes left. So let's see, I don't think this base coat of white on this blade is quite good enough for me yet. I would like it to be a little bit brighter. So for that, what we're actually going to do is bring out some Liquitex Heavy Body Acrylic Titanium White. This is one of my favorite whites in general. You will need some tools to work with this though. So I'm going to go ahead and grab up one of my modeling tools. So the way this works, it's going to come out a lot like toothpaste. So you pull some of this out, use your tool. So now you have some on your modeling tool, and you're going to just stick that right on your palette. And it does have the consistency of toothpaste, which is good and bad. If you don't thin this properly, it's going to leave a whole heck of a lot of texture on whatever it is you've put it on. But thinning it properly is going to give you some very good coverage. So I'm going to go ahead and pull the rest of that off there. Wipe this brush down, wipe this off. And we're going to work on thinning this heavy body acrylic here. So this should give us a little bit better coverage. And you don't need much of this at all. This is really not designed for model painting. So they comes in a huge tube of doom. But you can see here, as soon as I put this on, it's going to be much brighter. And it has a much greater coverage. I was trying to keep it mostly to the stuff that we sell at the store and that you can easily get on, you know, most of your websites and other things you use to get it. And what I'm going to do is leave this bottom side of the blade a little darker here. So the top side here. On the other side, we're going to do the same thing. And we'll be able to see that little bit of difference at the end. And this paint is not very hydrophilic, so it doesn't want to absorb the water very well. So you're going to have to help it along. Some of the other paints, like AK, that paint really wants the water. Not this, though. See, I'm going to come in, I'm going to follow the line right there, just with the edge of the brush. Alright. So now I have the top portions of that, which are going to be a little brighter than the bottom portions of it. That there's that little bit of overage right there is not a big deal, because that is going to have an edge highlight applied in the end, and it's not going to be noticeable. Okay, we're going to come to this other side, and it looks like this is mostly good here. So let's go ahead and take our ivory. So this is AK Interactive's ivory. We're going to go ahead and put on our speculative highlight here. I'm going to go ahead and stick that on my palette. Now, for non-metallic metals, I do like to use references. It's very easy to start painting something that you think kind of looks like a non-metallic, and then in the end, it's not. And so when people look at it, they won't know why it looks wrong, but it will look wrong. Let's check out our references here. This is the first thing you get on Google whenever you Google, I believe, brass and round. This is the first thing that comes up is this lock. And so using this lock, we're going to actually reverse it. It's going to be upside down, the effect. But because we're looking at this thing, this should help us to get all of our non-metallics right. So if I put this here, and actually it's going to be like this, you can see why I left that area that we're going to work on in just a second. And so that goes in a angle all the way to this other side. All right, coming up from the bottom. So let's go ahead and get rid of our reference here. That was just to make sure we had a good idea about what it is we're about to see. And then let's take our highlight. In fact, I have another reference here too, which is sometimes helpful. This is cylinder brass, the first thing that comes up whenever you are looking at this on Google as well. And so you can see there's a big speculative highlight there. And of course this is real, so this is actually a reflection. But we're going to make a speculative highlight right in the center, and then we're going to make one just below, separated by a darker color. So let's do that. So we're going to come in here with our ivory along the edge of this, and then pick it back up through here. So we have this. That's our major highlight here. Then that speculative running there, we're going to actually bring this around because we're going to get even more. And that's going to get pulled over here. And then we're going to have a smaller one that's going to run right down through here. And then coming up from the bottom, like we saw on the other, we need a darker color. And for this, we're going to be using some Hull Red, also by AK Interactive. Just going to get this on the palette here. And we're going to work this up from the bottom where you saw that other one. And it was in this kind of pizza slice of sorts. Going to grab up a little more of our Hull Red. Let's turn this around. Never be afraid to turn a model in a direction that's going to help you paint it better. On the previous one, we could see that these were separated by like a line like this. And then the same is going to be true here. We're going to pull this around there. in here, a little bit of our sand yellow, because if you remember on the example, there was an area that had our base tone, and then there was an area on the other side where the base tone turned a little bit lighter as it went up, and so this is that area over here. Now, this looks kind of bad, but what ends up happening is you end up blending all of these together. And so you blend them into each other and you get an effect that's real similar to what you see over here. You can see all the different pieces are kind of there, but they just need that time. And so time is what I'm going to put into this on the shield and on some of the other smaller aspects in between filming. So this has been the Wednesday stream here for the workbench at the guild, and I'm going to just up all the detail around the model. I'm going to finish the shield and some of these other small bits. I'm going to do some detail work on the face and teeth, and I'm going to make the transition on the sword, or on the spear I should say. And then I'll come back here on Monday at 12 and we'll take another look at it, and I'll give a go through of what all I did to finish it up, and we'll keep working on what remains of the army. And I believe what's going to remain here is a grouping of Chaos Warriors and a grouping of, or a unit I should say, of Iron Golems. And so we'll see what's left of those, and then after we're done with those, we're going to tackle some really big models. The centerpieces for this army are Arcanon, the Everchosen, and Be'lakor. And I believe what we're going to do is try another painting challenge for Arcanon, even possibly Be'lakor. So we'll see how that goes, and we'll see what ends up coming of that. But more on that later. So again, thank you folks for joining the stream. Hopefully we'll see you here next time.